A mysterious, tiny, fragile puppy is found crying for help on the side of the road. At first glance, he looks like he won't survive even a single night. He's smaller than anyone has ever seen. When he's rushed to the vet, the entire clinic expects bad news. But what the vet discovers shocks everyone so much that even the vet himself can't hold back tears. The truth behind this puppy's condition is more heartbreaking and more inspiring than anyone imagined. Before start the story, like, share, and subscribe for more stories. The story begins on a quiet morning in a small town where the streets are usually filled with the ordinary sounds of life. Cars moving, children laughing, birds singing. But on this day, there was a sound so faint and fragile that most people walked by without even noticing. It was the tiniest cry, like a whisper carried by the wind. A sound that didn't belong to the bustle of the street, but to something so small, so helpless, it was barely clinging to life. A young woman passing by suddenly stopped. Her ears caught that weak cry again, and this time she followed it. She bent down, scanning the sidewalk, and there, beneath a torn piece of cardboard, she saw a creature so tiny it didn't look real. At first glance, it was no bigger than the palm of her hand. Its fur was matted, its eyes half closed, and its little chest rose and fell with painful effort. It was a puppy, but not just any puppy. This was the smallest puppy she had ever seen, smaller than a newborn kitten, and so fragile that even the air seemed too heavy for him. His paws trembled as he tried to crawl forward, and his soft whimpers told a story of desperation. The woman's heart raced. She knew immediately that this little life was hanging by a thread. She carefully scooped the puppy into her hands, afraid that even the slightest wrong movement might hurt him. His body was ice cold, his heartbeat faint. People around her stopped to look, some gasping at the sight of such a tiny creature. Many whispered, "There's no way he'll survive." But the woman refused to give up hope. She rushed straight to the nearest veterinary clinic, holding the puppy close as if her warmth could keep him alive a little longer. Inside the clinic, the atmosphere shifted the moment she walked in. The receptionist froze at the sight of the puppy, her eyes wide with shock. Nurses hurried over, whispering in disbelief. "Is that really a puppy?" one of them asked. Some thought it was a toy, too small to be real. But as the puppy let out another weak cry, the room filled with a heartbreaking silence. Everyone knew this was real. And this was serious. The vet, a man with decades of experience, came rushing out from his office. He had seen countless animals in his career, the sick, the abandoned, the injured. But the moment his eyes landed on the puppy, he stopped in his tracks. His hands trembled slightly as he reached forward, lifting the fragile body onto a soft towel. For a few seconds, the room held its breath. The vet listened to the tiny heartbeat, checked the lungs, and felt the puppy's temperature. His face grew pale. He looked up at the woman, and his eyes filled with something no one in the room expected to see: tears. This is the smallest puppy I've ever treated," he whispered. His voice broke. He turned away, trying to compose himself, but the emotions were too strong. Everyone stared in shock. Why was a man who had dealt with life and death so many times overcome like this? What had he seen that broke his heart? The vet finally spoke again, his words heavy with sorrow. "This little one should not even be alive. He's far too underdeveloped, far too weak. Puppies this size, they don't usually survive. And yet, he's here, fighting, begging for help." The woman felt tears welling in her eyes as the vet carefully examined the puppy further. His bones were fragile, his fur thin, and his stomach completely empty. It was clear he hadn't eaten properly in days. But what shocked everyone even more was what the vet found next. The tiny pup's body bore faint marks, small scratches, tiny bruises that suggested he hadn't just been abandoned. He had struggled, alone, perhaps attacked by other animals or, even worse, neglected by humans who should have cared for him. The vet's hands shook as he gently traced the marks with his gloved fingers. "How could anyone let this happen?" he muttered, his voice breaking. The puppy let out another cry, and the sound pierced through the room like glass shattering. Nurses turned away, wiping their eyes. Even the receptionist covered her mouth. trying to hide her tears. The entire clinic was gripped by an overwhelming mixture of sorrow and anger. This wasn't just a sick puppy. This was a soul that had been through pain no creature this small should ever endure. But despite everything, the tiny pup still had a spark of life in his eyes, as if he was telling them, "I want to live. Please don't give up on me." And that look, that undeniable will to survive, was what shattered the vet's composure completely. He removed his glasses, his eyes red, his face wet with tears. "I can't promise he'll make it," he whispered, "but I promise I will fight for him." The woman nodded, clutching the vet's hand, her own tears falling freely. The entire clinic suddenly felt united in one mission: to save this smallest, most fragile puppy. No one knew if he had hours left, or days, or maybe a miracle chance at life. But they knew they couldn't turn away. And so, the battle for the tiniest life began. The vet ordered warm blankets, a special feeding tube, and oxygen support. The puppy was gently placed in a heated incubator, his tiny chest rising and falling as machines worked to stabilize him. Nurses hovered close, monitoring every heartbeat, every flicker of breath. The woman sat nearby, her hands shaking as she whispered prayers under her breath, though no words could truly capture what she felt. The first few hours were critical. Every moment felt like walking on the edge of a knife, waiting for disaster, but clinging desperately to hope. The vet refused to leave the room, his eyes glued to the fragile form in the incubator. And though the clinic had seen many emergencies before, there was something about this case that felt different. It wasn't just medicine at work. It was emotion, humanity, and the sheer refusal to let go of a life that wanted so badly to hold on. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. But in that room, on that day, the smallest puppy ever seen had captured every heart. And the story that was about to unfold would change them all forever. The clinic was silent except for the soft hum of machines and the fragile rhythm of the puppy's breathing inside the incubator. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on him, as if by sheer willpower alone they could keep his heart beating. Hours passed like days, each second stretched with unbearable weight. The woman who had rescued him hadn't moved from her chair, her gaze never leaving the incubator. She whispered softly to him, her words carrying a strange power, as though she was speaking directly to his tiny soul. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore. Just keep fighting." The vet stood close by, his arms folded, his face set in deep concentration. He checked the monitors again and again, unwilling to take even a moment's rest. Despite his experience, he admitted to himself that this little creature was unlike anything he had ever faced before. It wasn't just a medical case. It was a test of hope, a battle between despair and determination. And the stakes were impossibly high. In the middle of the night, as fatigue settled over the clinic, the puppy suddenly stirred. His paws twitched weakly, and a faint whimper escaped his tiny mouth. The sound made the woman jump to her feet. The vet leaned in immediately, watching as the puppy tried to push himself up, his fragile body trembling with effort. It was almost unthinkable. A creature so weak, so impossibly small, still fighting to rise, as though declaring, "I am not done yet." Everyone in the room felt it, a wave of energy, of raw determination radiating from this helpless being. Nurses exchanged glances, some with tears in their eyes. The receptionist, who had stayed long after her shift ended, whispered, "He wants to live." The vet nodded, his voice hoarse. "Yes, he does." But then came a terrifying moment. The puppy's breathing faltered, the tiny chest slowing dangerously. Alarms on the monitor beeped sharply, cutting through the silence, like sirens in the night. Panic surged in the room. A nurse rushed forward, the vet barking instructions, his hands steady, but his heart pounding. The woman pressed her hands together tightly, her knuckles white, as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Not yet," the vet muttered through clenched teeth, working swiftly. "Don't you dare give up now." He adjusted the oxygen, increased the warmth, gently rubbed the puppy's frail body, coaxing him to hold on. Minutes felt like an eternity. And then, against all odds, the little chest rose again, faint but steady. The alarm quieted. The room exhaled in unison. The vet slumped back for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow. His hands shook, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer intensity of what he had just witnessed. "This isn't just survival," he whispered. "This is a miracle in progress." The woman leaned against the glass of the incubator, her tears falling freely now. "He's stronger than all of us," she said softly. "He's teaching us how to fight." Word of the tiny puppy began to spread beyond the clinic walls. Staff whispered the story to their families, who shared it with friends. Soon, people in the town were talking about the smallest puppy they had ever heard of, a creature so fragile, yet so determined to live that even seasoned professionals were brought to tears. Some came to the clinic just to catch a glimpse, peering through the windows with wide eyes, their hearts moved by the story of survival unfolding inside. Days passed in a blur of care, fear, and hope. Every feeding was a delicate procedure, every movement monitored closely. The woman barely left the clinic, refusing to abandon the life she had saved. She brought blankets, stayed through the night, and whispered stories to the puppy as if her voice could give him strength. Nurses nicknamed the pup Tiny Fighter. The name spread quickly, becoming a symbol of courage for everyone who followed his progress. But with each passing day, new challenges arose. His body was still frail, his bones fragile, and his weight dangerously low. The vet knew they were walking a razor's edge. Any small setback could undo everything. He confided in the woman late one night, his voice heavy with worry. "I don't know if he can ever live a normal life. He's too small, too vulnerable. The odds are stacked against him." The woman shook her head firmly. "He's not just a statistic. He's a soul. As long as he wants to fight, we will fight with him." The vet stared at her, and for the first time in years, he felt his own hope rekindle. He realized that medicine alone could not explain what was happening here. It was something deeper, the will of life itself, defying every expectation. Then came the day that would shock them all. The woman arrived at the clinic early in the morning, expecting the usual sight of the puppy curled weakly in his incubator. But this time, as she peered inside, she froze. The puppy was not lying down. He was standing. His legs trembled violently, his paws barely gripping the blanket beneath him, but he was upright. For a moment, her breath caught in her throat. Then she cried out, "Doctor, come quick." The vet rushed in, nearly stumbling as he saw the sight. His jaw fell open, and for a moment, the room felt completely still. The tiniest, most fragile puppy they had ever seen was standing on his own, his eyes wider, brighter, more alive than ever before. The room erupted in gasps, cheers, and tears. Nurses covered their mouths, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The puppy wobbled, nearly falling, but then he looked up, straight at the woman who had saved him, and let out a tiny bark. It was weak, broken, but it was a bark. The first sound of defiance, of survival, of life screaming against the odds. The woman's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, overwhelmed with emotion. The vet turned away, tears streaming down his face, unable to contain the wave of feelings crashing through him. "This," he whispered, his voice breaking, "this is why we fight. This is why we never give up." The news spread like wildfire. The smallest puppy, who should never have survived, had not only lived through the night, but had stood, barked, and declared his will to live to the world. People began flooding the clinic with calls, messages, and visits. Strangers brought food, donations, and blankets, desperate to help the little fighter. His story touched hearts far beyond the town, reaching people who had never even met him, yet felt as though they knew him. Still, the battle wasn't over. The vet warned them that every step forward could be followed by setbacks. "He's proven he wants to live," he said, "but we can't forget how fragile he still is." Yet even as he spoke, hope glimmered brighter than ever before. The puppy had shown them all something extraordinary, that size does not define strength, and even the smallest voice can roar loud enough to shake the world. And as night fell once again, the clinic lights glowing softly against the dark, the woman sat by his side, whispering to him as he slept peacefully for the first time. "You're not alone anymore. You never will be again. You've already won more battles than anyone thought possible. And tomorrow, we'll fight again. Together." No one knew what the future held, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary puppy. This was a miracle in fur, a living testament to courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between humans and the lives they choose to save. And the story was only just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the little fighter's journey became the heartbeat of the clinic. Every morning, the staff would gather around before their shifts began, not to check their schedules or sip coffee, but to see him. His presence filled the building with something that no medicine could ever provide: hope. Patients came and went, but it was the smallest puppy in the incubator who inspired every soul who walked through the doors. The woman who had rescued him became his shadow. She rarely left his side, choosing instead to spend her days and nights watching over him. She whispered to him as he ate, as he slept, as he struggled to take each new step. And the more she stayed, the stronger the bond between them grew. It wasn't just about saving a life anymore. It was about love. It was about destiny. The vet, too, had changed. The man who had once prided himself on keeping a professional distance now found himself deeply invested. He caught himself smiling at the smallest progress, a steadier breath, a stronger heartbeat, the first wag of a tiny tail. It reminded him why he had chosen this path so many years ago, before the endless paperwork and routine cases dulled the fire in his heart. This puppy had reignited it. But life was not finished testing them. One late evening, when the clinic had grown quiet, the puppy suddenly grew restless. His breathing became shallow, his tiny body trembling once more. Panic swept through the room as alarms beeped. The woman's face drained of color, and she clutched the vet's arm. "Please don't let him go."
"Not now."
"Not after everything." The vet rushed into action, adjusting the oxygen, checking his fragile lungs, and listening for any irregularities. He knew that setbacks like this were always possible, but knowing didn't make it any easier. The woman wept quietly, whispering, "Stay with me. Please, you're stronger than this." Minutes dragged by, heavy with fear. And then, slowly, the trembling stopped. The puppy steadied, his breathing evening out. The crisis had passed, but it left the room shaken. The vet exhaled sharply, running a hand over his tired face. "Every day with him is a miracle," he admitted softly. "Every breath he takes is a victory." From that night on, they doubled their efforts. Around-the-clock care, careful feeding schedules, constant monitoring. Everything was adjusted to give him the best chance possible. And though he remained small, his spirit was enormous. Each time he stumbled, he got back up. Each time he weakened, he found new strength. Then came the day that would change everything. The woman arrived early, as always, but instead of finding him curled in his incubator, she found him standing proudly at the edge of a soft blanket laid out for him. His legs still wobbled, but his eyes were brighter, sharper. And then, to her astonishment, he took a step. One tiny, shaky step forward. And then another. Her gasp echoed through the clinic, drawing nurses and staff rushing into the room. They froze as they saw him, the smallest puppy they had ever seen, walking. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she fell to her knees. "You're doing it," she whispered. "You're really doing it." The vet stood silently, his throat tight, his eyes glistening. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just watched, as though witnessing something sacred. The puppy wobbled, stumbled, but each time he pushed forward again, determined not to give up. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. The news spread like wildfire. Videos of his first steps were shared online, capturing hearts around the world. People who had never met him sent messages of love and support. Donations poured in. Letters arrived at the clinic, some from children who drew pictures of him, others from adults who wrote how his fight had given them strength in their own battles. He had become more than a puppy. He was a symbol, proof that even the smallest, weakest voice could inspire millions. But fame never touched him. To him, the world was simple, warmth, food, safety, and the love of the woman who had saved him. Every time she held him, his tiny body relaxed. Every time she spoke, his ears perked and his tail wagged weakly. He had chosen her just as much as she had chosen him. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, the woman sat outside the clinic with the puppy cradled against her chest. His eyes were open wide, gazing at the world around him. Birds flew overhead, and for the first time, he barked, a strong, clear sound that startled her before making her laugh through her tears. "That's my boy," she whispered. "You've found your voice." The vet joined her, smiling softly. "He's ready," he said. "Ready for what?" she asked. "Ready to leave here. Ready to go home. With you." Her heart swelled at the words. She had dreamed of this moment, but hearing it aloud felt surreal. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she kissed the puppy's head. "You'll never be alone again," she promised. And so, after weeks of fear, struggle, and hope, the smallest puppy ever seen left the clinic not as a patient, but as family. Wrapped in a blanket, he nestled into the woman's arms, his tiny body finally safe, his future no longer uncertain. The staff gathered to say goodbye, some crying, others smiling, all of them changed by the little life that had passed through their hands. The vet stood at the door, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Take care of him. He's more than just a survivor. He's a miracle." The woman nodded, her eyes locked on the puppy who had captured her soul. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to him." As she walked away, the puppy lifted his head and looked back, his eyes wide, his tail wagging faintly. The staff waved, their hearts full. They knew they would never forget him. In the days that followed, the puppy's story continued to spread across the globe. People spoke of him as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even when life seems impossibly fragile, the will to survive can overcome anything. The woman received letters from strangers who said his journey had given them courage to face their own struggles. Some said he saved them, without ever meeting them. And every night, as the woman lay down to sleep with the puppy curled beside her, she would whisper the same words she had spoken the day she found him. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore. Just keep fighting." But deep down, she knew the truth. He didn't need to fight alone anymore, because together, they had already won. The story of the smallest puppy ever seen was not about weakness. It was not about tragedy. It was about resilience, about love, and about the miracles that can happen when compassion meets courage. And though he would always be small, to those who knew his story, he would forever be larger than life.